Hi, this is Bear Before Bed. Tonight, I'll read you a quiet story just for winding down. You don't need to focus. You don't need to stay awake. Just listen and let the story carry you into sleep. During the day, the city looked ordinary. The streets were narrow but clean, lined with stone worn smooth by time. Windows stayed open, letting in quiet air. Shops closed at the same gentle hour every evening, as if the city shared a single clock. Nothing in the city asked to be noticed. Nothing demanded attention. Everything simply remained where it was. People walked without hurry, as if time itself had agreed to slow down here. Their steps were unmeasured. Their pauses felt natural. They greeted one another without names and parted without questions. If someone had asked when the city was built, no one would have known the answer. If someone had asked how long it had been here, the question would have felt unnecessary, almost out of place. The city did not remember its beginning. It did not wait for an ending. It was not new. It was not old. The city was simply there. By morning, the street looked the same. The light was softer. The air felt cooler. The city moved at its usual pace. Where the building had stood, there was now an open space, not empty, not broken. The street continued without interruption. Footsteps passed through naturally. No one slowed down. No one looked twice. It felt as if the space had always been there, waiting quietly to be used. By morning, the street looked the same. The light was softer than the night before, spreading slowly across the stone. The air felt cooler, carrying the quiet of early hours. The city moved at its usual pace. Shops prepared to open. Windows reflected pale daylight. Nothing suggested that the night had been different. Where the building had stood, there was now an open space, not empty, not damaged. The street continued without interruption, as if the space had always belonged there. Footsteps passed through it naturally. No one slowed down. No one hesitated. People adjusted without noticing. Paths shifted slightly. Movements continued as before. It felt ordinary, unremarkable, as if the city had quietly corrected itself and moved on. That night, the city repeated itself. The light faded at the same hour. Windows darkened one by one. The street grew quiet in the familiar way. Again, one building was gone by morning, and again, no one spoke of it. The bears noticed something then, not the absence itself, but how easily the city accepted it. The missing buildings were never new. They were never places people gathered. They were spaces passed without pause, rooms entered without reason. What disappeared had already been left behind. The city did not remove what was needed. It removed what no longer waited to be used. After several nights, the street no longer felt the same. It was not smaller. It was not broken. But the space between things had begun to change. Where buildings had disappeared, the city did not replace them. Instead, it allowed the street to open. Corners softened. Paths widened slightly. The air seemed to linger longer in certain places. The bears stopped walking through without pause. They stood where walls had once been, measuring the space with their eyes, not searching for what was lost, but noticing what had taken its place. That was when one of the bears began to return at night, not to watch buildings disappear, but to remember how the city rearranged itself afterward. Something was no longer vanishing. Something was being rewritten. As the nights continued, the city no longer felt like a series of streets. It began to feel like a collection of spaces. Some areas opened wide, while others narrowed until they became passages rather than roads. Walls ended where they once continued. Stairs appeared without clear destinations. Levels shifted. The bears returned night after night, not to confirm what had vanished, but to notice how the city rearranged itself afterward. The notebook filled slowly, not with explanations, not with conclusions, only with where things had been and where space now chose to remain. Later, the city led them somewhere enclosed, not a building, not a street, a place that felt held, as if the city had folded inward. Sound changed there. Footsteps softened. The air stayed still. The bears did not remember entering it. They only noticed that they were already inside. Here, the city did not open outward. It gathered itself, as if preparing to keep something rather than release it. The notebook paused in the bear's hands. This place was not about what had vanished. It was about what remained long enough to be recorded. Beyond the enclosed space, the city lowered itself. Stairs ended. Walls gave way. The ground leveled, and the sound of movement softened into something slower. Water appeared without warning. Not a river, not a canal. A wide, still surface, held carefully in stone. The bears stood at its edge, watching the city return to them only as a reflection. Here, nothing disappeared. Nothing rearranged itself. The city simply waited, long enough to be seen twice. After that night, the city began to respond, not to movement, not to presence, but to what was written. Places the notebook described did not return. They settled. Edges grew clearer. Distances stopped shifting. The bears noticed that some spaces no longer changed at all. They had reached the edge of something, not the city, but its willingness to rearrange. That night, the notebook was no longer alone. Beneath it, resting where it had not been before, was a book. It was heavier, older, bound in plain cloth without a title. The bears did not remember placing it there. They did not remember finding it. It simply waited, as if it had always belonged beneath the notebook. When one bear opened it, the pages did not resist. They opened to a place already familiar. The first line was familiar, not similar, not close, the same. It described the city as it had been, before anything began to change. The bears did not rush through the pages. They read slowly, as if careful not to disturb the order of things. Each line matched what they remembered. Not perfectly, but closely enough to feel unsettling. This was not a record of what had happened. It was a description of what had been held together. The bears did not question what the book was. They did not look for the beginning. They did not search for an ending. They continued reading, not quickly, not carefully, just enough to keep the pages open. Nothing changed in the room. Nothing shifted in the city. And yet, everything remained exactly as it was meant to be as long as the reading continued. The bears understood this without naming it. Eventually, the pages began to thin. The bears did not notice when it happened. They only noticed when there was less to turn. The last page was not marked. It did not announce itself. It was simply blank. No words, no traces, no suggestion of what should come next. The book remained open, holding nothing and asking for nothing. The city did not react. The room did not change. The bears stayed where they were. The bear reached the end without ceremony. There was nothing left to read, nothing left to hold open. The book did not resist. It did not hesitate. The bear closed it. The sound was soft, almost unnoticeable. After that, Nothing needed to remain the same. By morning, there was nothing left to finish. The ground remained. The sky remained. The city did not return. There was no sound to mark the ending, no sign to confirm it. What had been held had been released. The bear did not stay to watch. The story no longer required it. And so, quietly, the night gave way to day. If this story stayed with you, you're welcome to like and subscribe for more.